time to go to St. Louis, covering the Missouri Tigers for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Stu Durando joins us here on the News Sentinel sports page. Hey, Stu, this is Vince Ferrara and Mike Griffith from the Knoxville News Sentinel. How you doing, Stu?
How you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you so much for doing it. So a lot of the attention was on James Franklin going in because of the shoulder surgery in the spring. How has James Franklin looked in the spring so far?
He's been pretty good. I mean, health-wise, he's fine. They did. They took some precautions with him early on and had him not throw for a couple days. But there's really been no reports of soreness or anything along those lines. So it appears he's 100% and ready to go.
We're visiting with Stu Durando from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch covering the Missouri Tigers. So what are the other notable things in camp that have stood out to you about this Missouri Tigers football team entering the SEC?
Well, one of the first things early on, the first week to 10 days, is they had a bunch of injuries on the offensive line, and they've kind of been reshuffling what they're doing up front. They lost, first they lost their right tackle before camp started. He's since returned, but he was out until this week. They lost a starter at guard. They lost a backup on the line, and they had also previously lost a guy who was considered one of their top 10 linemen. So depth-wise, they're hurting there. They're shuffling some guys around. In fact, they've got at one of the guard spots, the competition is between a true freshman and a former walk-on who just got a scholarship. So they might be a little iffy on the line going in, and, obviously that's going to be critical in the SEC. Also, their left tackle is one of the guys with the most experience, but he's coming back from a knee injury that kept him out all of last year. So they've definitely got some issues up there. They're a little thinner in the backfield this year because Henry Josie's injury last year when he was tearing up, one of the top 5 rushers in the country. So they're, kind of playing around with some things there with their running backs and who's going to be the top guy. Receiving-wise, I think they're pretty decent. Plus they've got Dorial Green-Beckham coming in as a freshman, and he's going to be a factor. On the defensive side, I think you're just looking at a pretty solid unit. The defense has been ahead of the offense pretty much all of camp, and they've got some guys who are some difference makers. They've got some pretty good experience, especially in the linebacking core. So I think they feel like they're going to be pretty solid defensively going into the conference.
What's your impression of how the schedule sets up for Missouri entering the SEC?
Well, what they're used to being in the Big 12 was that schedule where they play all their non-conference games up front. So September would be full of non-conference games, largely non-BCS teams. And then they would, sometimes even have a bye, and then they wouldn't play that first conference game until Game 5. And this year, it's a totally different mindset because they start with SEC in Week 2 and then with Georgia at home, and then Week 4 going to South Carolina. So not only do they have to play 2 early conference games that they're not used to, but they're against top 10 teams. So, the schedule, it's tough. There's no question. They've got to go to, trying to think of it without it in front of me, they got to go to Tennessee later and to Florida. So the SEC is going to provide a challenge for them in that first year. They've got Alabama coming to Columbia, so people will be hyped up about that one. If they can get their non-conference games and, maybe split or go 3-5 in the SEC, they should be in position for a bowl game.
What's your range of wins, do you think? What's a realistic expectation for wins? Your final things, Stu.
Well, I would think that, there's definitely some games on the SEC schedule that they should win or could win. You've got Kentucky, you've got Vanderbilt at home. They're familiar with Texas A&M, even though they play that game on the road. So I'm looking at a pretty decent non-conference schedule. I think the 8 is probably I'm thinking a high point. 7 or 8 wins would be my best guesstimate at this point.
Stu Durando covers the Missouri Tigers. You can follow his work, St. Louis Post-Dispatch on the Missouri Tigers. Stu, really appreciate it. Sorry, it was a little bit abbreviated. We had some stuff going on here, as you probably well know. Yeah, with Derek Rogers. But we appreciate the time, Stu.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, guys.
All right,
Anytime.
that's Stu Durando joining us from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.